Module 4, Change and the Organization. Organizational Culture. In this module, we will look at organizational metaphors. We will also look at organizational culture in relation to levels of organizational culture, how culture develops and how to identify it, how culture is shaped and communicated, and positive cultural focuses. Organizational metaphors. In his book Images of Organization, Gareth Morgan, 2006, describes how the way that we think about organizations, the metaphors we hold in our minds, affects our behavior. In particular, the way we approach change is affected by the mental models we use. Morgan lists 8 metaphors, but acknowledges that there could be others. One interesting additional metaphor, architecture, is added to the table. This can be found on page 32 of the handbook. Of the 9 metaphors on this table, only these 4 are examinable at the end of this course. Machines can be designed and controlled. Brains, intelligence-led and resemble a library and memory bank. Political systems, systems of government managing the common and conflicting needs of various interest groups. Flux and transformation, chaos and complexity, where hierarchy and control have limited relevance. Order emerges naturally. Refer to the table for additional detail on each of the metaphors, what it means, how it affects attitudes to leadership, and implications for the way change is approached. Thinking about these and other metaphors can make a profound difference to the way we manage change, in a number of ways. It is important to listen to the words used by those leading change, and to identify the patterns of metaphor that lie behind them. It provides a framework for thinking about a particular change. Which metaphor provides the best insights into the issues involved? How might we look at the change from other perspectives? It offers a way of considering different approaches to change offered by different authors and consultants, helping us to evaluate the likely strengths and weaknesses of particular approaches. Morgan says, "My aim is not to present an exhaustive account of every conceivable metaphor that can be used to understand and shape organizational life. Rather, it is to reveal, through illustration, the power of metaphor in shaping organizational management, and how the ultimate challenge is not to be seduced by the power or attractiveness of a single metaphor, old or new, so much as to develop an ability to integrate the contributions of different points of view." Take a few moments to undertake the following exercise. Select 4 of the metaphors and consider their advantages and disadvantages to organizations going through change. Organizational culture. Trompenaars and Hampton Turner describe cultures of all kinds as having 3 levels. Level 1, surface, visible artifacts and products, e.g., office layout and furnishings. Level 2, deeper, norms and values. Norms are the shared and accepted sense of what is right or wrong in an organization. They are expressed in formal ways through the company rulebook, and in less formal ways by social control. Values are the basis on which something is seen as good or bad, based on the shared ideals and aspirations of those in the organization, and as a result guide how people want to behave at their best. Although they may occasionally be put into words, norms and values are most often noticed when they are violated. The rest of the time they are simply assumed. Level 3, deepest. Basic assumptions. E.g., the assumption that all people are equal. Basic assumptions are seldom articulated but underpin many of the norms and values of some societies. One example of a basic assumption in operation occurred in a retail pharmacy chain. The assumption was that patient healthcare, medical ethics, and the practitioner-patient relationship were supremely important. The pharmacy chain was bought by a major consumer goods retailer with a strong and aggressive sales culture. The merger failed, largely because the retail branch managers, mostly strongly ethical pharmacists, could not adapt and operate effectively in the sales culture of the new parent company. How culture develops and how to identify it. In the organization's history, particular assumptions, values, and norms will have led to its success. These are often the assumptions of the founder or of leaders. The lessons about what really matters sink deeply into the organizational unconscious, shaping future behavior from beneath. When change occurs, it may threaten this unconscious system and suffer rejection. To manage change in an organization requires sensitivity to these processes and the ability to bring culture to organizational consciousness. There it can be discussed and evaluated for its relevance to current needs. It is then possible to manage key messages across the organization in a way that supports change. Shine says, "It is not possible for either an external person or an internal person, working alone, to identify the strands of organizational culture. It requires careful collaboration between those inside the organization, well embedded in its culture, and someone external who can see the assumptions insiders are making, supported by a thoughtful process." How culture is shaped and communicated. Behaviors. The link between leaders' behaviors and culture produced, humility and willingness to admit mistakes produces openness and learning. Asking for commitments and following up produces a culture of accountability. Favoritism not based on performance produces politics. Symbols. Any time when one event is seen as part of a larger pattern, such as patterns in how leaders make choices about use of time or resource allocation. Rituals, also patterns, but this time of expected behavior, could include a regular informal mid-morning gathering around the coffee machine, which emphasizes a relational culture. Storytelling, again following a pattern like the values in fairy stories and national legends, talks about the defining moments of an organization's history, together with its heroes and villains. Systems. Those mechanisms of management which control, plan, measure and reward your organization and its people. Examples include the way HR systems, and especially performance management systems, operate, customer processes and organizational structure, how many levels, how easy is access to senior-level people. Culture and climate. There is often confusion about how the terms culture and climate are used. We have described here the way we see culture. Organizational climate is somewhat more changeable, reflecting the current feelings and perceptions of key stakeholders. For example, this might include the feelings of staff about the way they are led and resourced, whether they currently experience their workplace as a good employer to work for. Those climatic conditions are influenced in part by underlying culture, just as global climate is influenced by the physical structure of the Earth, but are also open to medium-term fluctuations resulting from a variety of non-cultural factors. 5 positive cultural focuses an organization might select. Achievement, performance, accountability, delivery. Customer-centric, externally focused, service-oriented and sustainable. One team, collaborative and focused on the internal customer. Innovative, entrepreneurship, agile, creative and learning. People first, empowerment, development, care. Blends of these 5 organization types are certain to exist, and additional focuses are also possible. Cultural archetypes. Although they do not feature in the exam, Trompenaars and Hampton Turner's cultural archetypes are helpful illustrations of how culture may be described. They categorize cultures using 2 pairs of opposed ideas, each pair forming a bipolar scale. A task person scale provokes thought about the balance between the importance placed on tasks and results, and that placed on people and relationships. Clearly, the ideas at both ends of this scale are important, but most cultures tend to value one more than the other. An egalitarian hierarchical scale is mostly about how widely or narrowly power and influence are distributed or controlled. The authors use these 2 scales to create 4 cultural archetypes with very evocative titles: Incubator, Guided Missile, Family, and Eiffel Tower. They helpfully describe the way that each of these will affect relationships, reward systems, attitudes to authority and people, patterns of thought, change and conflict resolution. Incubator. If organizations are to be tolerated at all, they should be there to serve as incubators for self-expression and self-fulfillment. Guided Missile. This culture is oriented to tasks, Typically undertaken by teams or project groups, people must do whatever it takes to complete a task. Family. A power-oriented culture, in which the leader is regarded as a caring father. This type of power is effectively intimate and, it is hoped, benign. Eiffel Tower. Like the formal bureaucracy for which it stands, it is very much a symbol of the machine age. Its structure, too, is more important than its function. Clearly, it is possible in principle to plot a particular organization at any point within the space identified by these axes, so that more subtle differences of culture will be reflected here than would be seen in a pure type approach to culture. Now, take some time to consider the following. What is the prevailing culture in your current organization? What is the evidence for this? Identify an aspect of the culture you would like to modify. What 3 things would need to change to support this? End of module. In this module, we have looked at change and the organization in relation to organizational metaphors and how they are used in change. We also looked at organizational culture, the 3 layers of culture identified by Trompenaars and Hampton-Turner, how culture occurs and how it is shaped and communicated and how to identify it. In the next module, we will look at models of the change process.